Hey guys, it's Clutch at Off-Grid Ojai. It's Monday night. Kind of a night person. It's my kind of me time. I thought we would do some international music, as that's kind of the topic tonight. I was going to talk about Cuba, but last night we watched a movie called The Killing Fields, which I'm sure you've heard of. It's an older movie about the genocide in Cambodia and how that all came about. And Cambodia is a French colony. They spoke French there and Cambodian. So this group is called Les Nubians, which we learned earlier in the homeschooling video is princess in African. They're French and they are from Chad. And I think they went back to Chad and went back and forth from Chad to France. Anyway, okay, so we watched The Killing Fields last night. I know I'm going to take a digression, but there are no coincidences in life, and I couldn't just stop and wonder like how similar the optics and the ideals were in the movie as it is today. And I had no intention of doing these kind of travel portal videos so political. I have a lot of travel experience and I've been to a lot of places, and I was just going to discuss, anyway, here we go. There are no coincidences. First, I wanted to thank everybody. I'm going to go a little bit slower. I noticed that you guys are actually watching the longer videos, and I feel like I'm rushing and I'm not getting everything in because I want to make these fast because people get bored, frankly. But I promise if you are into this channel at all, and you take the time to listen, because I'm going to go slower, I think you'll get a lot out because I have a lot of kind of different context. And I am shocked that I feel like I'm the only one alone out here that feels the way I do or seen the things that I've seen. And a lot of the things that I've seen and read in history are chilling because they have happened many times before. So I think the next video we're going to do is about Vietnam and Cambodia with their last year, and this one's going to be about Cuba, and then after that I think we're going to do Rwanda, the trifecta, which I went to last year as well, or 2 years ago. So, The Killing Fields. I know it's kind of gruesome maybe for a 13-year-old, but I really I feel like there's this urgency to educate him and teens about what can happen with narratives and mob mentality and no free thought, basically, which is what was going on in that movie. And if you've seen the movie, it's the kids who do most of the killing, under 16, because they've been brought up purely, unfortunately, evil because that's all they know. And again, it's not their fault. So when we went there, you can see it in their eyes that, but you've got to forgive and move on, or else everybody will be killing everybody forever. So just quickly, and this is not going to be quickly, I'm going slower because I noticed in the other videos I stutter, and I've stuttered my whole life, and when I was a kid it was hard to even get words out. So I have to say everything in my head prior to saying it. So I'm going to try to slow down so I don't stutter. But it's not an excuse. I never use stuttering as a disability or excuse. Everybody's dealt the cards that they're dealt with, and you deal with it. Some people get the pocket aces, and some people get the stutter. Anyway, so when I think about the optics and ideals, and I look at the news, and I don't watch a lot of TV. I just want to see what they're trying to tell you to think. But Ella, no. It's no free thought, right? You're told what to think, and in this movie, if you even question it or you're educated, they kill you. Maybe in modern times they ostracize you, they destroy your business, they throw stuff on you, they might kill you. We're just one step below the killing fields, and this is the 2020 version of it. got the, so let me just get this out. I'm not Republican or Democrat. I believe in the Constitution, and I'm so happy to live in this country. It's the best place to live. It's not perfect, but no country or system is perfect. And it's up to the people to make the best out of it. So in this country, you know, obviously we have the Democrats and Republicans, and I think that, you know, on the far left, let's just call it for this discussion, Black Lives Matter, and on the far right, the white supremacists. There are very few, when you look at the total population of these parties, I think most are in the center. But they get all the sensationalism and media coverage because it's sensational. And they're stirring up trouble, and that's what causes fear. We talked about fear. And what worries me about the anarchists, and I see the same thing, right? It's the same thing as the movie last night. There are kids out there protesting, burning things, looting things, and you know, and if you have a different thought, you're racist. And in their case, you're the enemy. You know, I just think that kind of concerns me is in the movie it happened too. Whereas even on their own side, if anybody has kind of a divergent thought from their policy, they're also ostracized and demonized, even if they're in the same party. And that happened last night in the movie. And that's what is really concerning to me, because they don't even tolerate it inside their own party. And like, I think like Tulsi Gabbard is a good example of that. I actually liked her and probably would have voted for her if she made it, versus the choices that I had, and just so you know. So anyway, I'll do some posting on Instagram, some pictures of Cambodia and Vietnam, and we'll do the next, I'm gonna call this segment the travel teleporter, because I don't know that we're gonna go to any of these places anytime soon, so you'll get to visit some of these places through some of the pictures and stories that I'm going to tell. So Cuba. I went to Cuba about a year and a half, maybe 2 years now, with a coworker of mine, Tiff. And, you know, it was very interesting. It's not a vacation. It's more of an educational trip, and it's certainly not for kids. Americans can't go there and travel freely technically. Americans have to go on what they call a person-to-person visa, which means that you're exchanging ideas every day with different sections of the population. So you have an itinerary that goes and meets different things, and you talk to people, but it's kind of all in the guise of that. But it's, you know, you're looking at, it's tourism also, right? You're looking at stuff. So I don't know how much history you guys know about Cuba, but let's just do a little quick, you know, I'm sure maybe you'll do your own research. But Cuba was discovered by the Western people. I mean, it was populated by the indigenous peoples, but it was discovered by the Europeans by no other than Christopher Columbus. Actually on his voyage in 1492 with his 3 ships that I don't think they want you to know this anymore, but do you remember? It's the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. So he discovered it and basically brought disease, and you know, disease was there back then, and most of the indigenous people died anyway. Fast forward, the British, the French, the Spanish fought over it for the next couple hundred years, and the Spanish ended up with it towards the end, and they actually imported a ton of slaves. I think about 300,000 to the island. The regular white population was about 150, 200, and the free black slave population was about another 200. So during that time, you could buy your freedom if you were a slave. I don't know how you did that if you didn't make any money, but anyway, maybe somebody could buy it for you. Anyway, that doesn't end well. I always say that in risk analysis. My mind looks at all of the different forks in the road, and I'll say it ends well or doesn't end well. So it didn't, and they had a revolution, I believe in, I forgot the date, couple revolutions, 1751, 1868, but where I guess 1868 is where we want to pick up, because that's where we got involved in the United States. And Theodore Roosevelt did his famous charge up San Juan Hill and had the victory. And many people might not know this, but it was very difficult. Most people wouldn't have been able to do that. Certainly any of our leaders today to actually lead his troops up the mountain, and the odds were against them. In fact, it was like 10 or 20 to 1. In other words, 200 Americans died for every Cuban. It was, they had to charge up the hill against defenses, and they got slaughtered, but they had good leadership and made it and won. And there were a couple battles like that. Now, I don't necessarily condone what we did there, and this is why you'll see that I'm not, always rah USA, but I think Teddy Roosevelt had good intentions, because if we didn't go in there, somebody else would have, France, and tried to control it and do what they wanted to do, so we wanted to get in there. And his intention was to give it back, but then 1956 happened, and that's when the communists took over. So I'm going to do this is going to be a long video, because I discovered some stuff when I did some research on Teddy Roosevelt yesterday, and I'm going to put that at the end. And I think if you stick to the end, it's just, again, there are no coincidences. So just a little bit about Cuba. It's a beautiful place. The people are really friendly. There's no crime. You don't have to worry about. There's nothing to buy, so I don't think there's nothing to steal. They don't beg. They just don't know about that for money or anything yet. But unfortunately, when you get there, it is apparent that or not apparent, but it just looks like it's just stuck in time. Still, the war ended last month. There's rubble and destroyed buildings, and I don't know where all the money for infrastructure for the people is, but it's certainly not going to the people. So that was kind of a shock. Obviously, the new construction and new hotels and stuff you see are all Western investment, and I don't know how that's going now with the COVID and whatnot. Havana's, a quaint city. There's a fort, there's a few factories, there's churches and markets. It's a nice city. The interesting thing about the restaurants there is all the nicer restaurants are in the nicer buildings, but they're terrible because they're communist run and there's no incentive, and it's just not great. And so all of the best restaurants are these new, kind of privately owned places that are in like dilapidated buildings. I put a picture on Instagram of the staircase that we had to go up to, but once you get up there, it's kind of interesting and nice with antiques, and the food is better, because they have incentive to make $1 or $2. Same with the hotels. Big hotels are government run, and I put a picture of a little cardboard key, and I'll get to this, I guess I'll just get to it now, but we drove to this place called Cienfuegos, which is in the southeast of Cuba, and it's really kind of rural, and it hasn't changed probably in 150 years. There's still donkeys and pulling carts over cobblestone roads, and it's a sugarcane kind of community, and they've been doing it for hundreds of years. So while we're into Cuba, kind of just the island itself, it's about, 11 million people is the population. That's like greater Los Angeles. 50,000 square miles is the volume. On the west side, there's a place called Vinales. And on the way to there, I stopped at a Cohiba cigar farm where I met the, again, proud plantation owner who got to plant this land, and he's doing well because he's able to sell it for what it's worth. And his hard work and duty of care is rewarded. Let's just take an aside here, right? This is why America was able to compete as an upstart nation right away, because part of what old regimes did in power was to keep their population down. They didn't educate them. You weren't allowed to read. I was looking for maps and books in Cuba. I collect them, obviously, and they were all destroyed or in museums because they didn't want you to read. Same with the Europeans, right? They didn't want their populations to read, and so they came to America to have freedom of religion and thought, etc. And in America, everyone was equal and everyone could be educated, and they were. And and when I read a lot of these old books, I hate to say it, but at the turn of the 19th century, I believe the American population was way more educated than they are today. And just looking at what a 16-year-old Civil War soldier wrote home to his parents, the penmanship, the vocabulary, the eloquent writing, it was just superior to what we have today. And people knew about music. Everyone knew how to play the piano or learn the arts, and they were well-rounded. And I just feel like that's all been lost. If someone asks, I'm just on this big tangent, but if someone asks, if I could go back in time and try to change the direction of our country, it would be at that time. The Civil War had ended about 30 years after African Americans could vote and were citizens, even though there was still a lot of discrimination until the Civil Rights Act. But blacks were represented in Congress, and they had more senators and representatives than they do today. And they actually were representing their communities and were on the right path. And you guys can look to see what happened, but I'll give you a hint. It was Lyndon B. Johnson is when things turned, and and they started to move towards the Democratic Party, for which I still don't understand. Anyway, so back to Cuba. We also went to this place called Valadero, which is where there's beaches, and topless beaches and kite surfers. It's pretty cool. A lot of Canadians there. We're not technically, as Americans, allowed to stop and go to the beach, but wink, wink. I told the driver we're stopping here for an hour, and we walked around and saw it. But the interesting part about this story is, this artist her name is India, but her real name is Linda Caballero. She's Puerto Rican. I thought it was topical because we got Cuba, Puerto Rico, the Philippines, and Guam at the Spanish-American War. And we, as a kind of token payment, we got it for $20 million. Can you imagine all those places? So she was born in the 60s, so she probably went through some of the things that we're going to talk about. So in Valadero, our driver goes into this little store and is so excited, comes out and goes, I found this yogurt. And I'm like, cool. And he had just a kind of plain white yogurt. It wasn't anything fancy, but he had 2 bags of it. And I'm like, what's up with the yogurt? And he wasn't like offering it to me. Not that I wanted it, but he said, oh no, my family really likes yogurt and we can't find it a lot. And when I see it, I want to buy some. I'm like, great, cool. And he goes, let me tell you a story. And I'm like, tell me. And this is what's great about traveling, because you really get perspective, and I just want to share these kind of stories. So he goes, I went to Miami once, and I went to the grocery store to get yogurt, and I couldn't find it. And I said, what, you couldn't find yogurt? He's like, yeah. So I asked this lady where it was, and I'm like, yeah. And she says, you're standing in front of it. And he's like, what? So you guys have all stood in front of a wall of yogurt with every color and flavor possible, right? That is just incomprehensible to a Cuban, and even a Cuban who is educated and talks to Americans all the time and expects and sees things that rural Cubans don't. I mean, that was just incomprehensible to him. The point is, we are so lucky, and we don't even understand how lucky we are. And I keep on driving that point home as I travel the world. I appreciate this every day. On this topic of food, Cuba, technically, no one starves, right? They're socialist, communist, one party, one thought country. Everybody has a working wage. Everybody has a job. Everybody gets an education. Okay, but when you go into the government store to get your provisions and you have this little book, like an old savings book that they stamp that you got on that month or whatever, you get 4 things. You get sugar, rice, beans, and I can't think of the last thing. That's it. Okay? And it's not much better in the regular store. You get like 8 things. Soap, rum, tobacco, milk, not much. it's the private stores that are now allowed to come up that kind of have more and give the population more stuff. The kids finally got cell phones, or the people who got cell phones, but it's not total service and it's censored. We should talk about this because not today, but censorship is a huge problem. It's probably one of the biggest problems that we're facing right now. Anyway, so the kids have to go to these kind of hot zones. You get this like card that you can get a certain amount of minutes, even for us, and you can get on the internet. Can you imagine? And it's censored, but they get to see some stuff. Anyway, so yeah, that's what you get, and our driver's an engineer and the bellman's a doctor, and it's like, yeah, everyone has a degree, but there are no jobs, and the hospitals are 3 to a bed, 4 to a bed kind of thing, and same in Cambodia. So, just be careful what you wish for. None of these kind of socialist regimes end up well, and they end up having dictators. I don't understand when they call themselves communists and socialists, because the leader never changes, right? I mean, you think you were going to kick out Kim or Kim Jr. or Castro Jr. or Saddam Hussein or Hitler or Mussolini or any of these people. Saddam Hussein, they weren't going anywhere. Well, those Hussein and Hitler were more dictators and fascists. Well, let's talk about fascism, because that word gets thrown around a lot. And I don't think that people that use it understand that they're actually describing themselves. So fascism is back to single thought, no free thought, right? So it's a country that doesn't tolerate any free thought. And if you are of the kind of opposing thought or religion or whatever it is, you are killed, ostracized, deported, banned, everything until it's unbearable. And that's fascism, right? You don't get to have another opinion. And if you do, you are racist. You're a white supremacist. You're a Black Lives Matter. And so that's fascism. In America, we're supposed to be able to have our opinions, and that's what's so great about it, right? Even if you don't like it, tough. That's his opinion. Deal with it. As long as they're not violent and hurting my family, you have a right to your opinion. And we'll vote, and nobody will vote for you, and that'll be that. When we get on to, there's so much in the news. I mean, how far are we going to go back in history on these, like, abolishing history? They want to wipe away history of, I'm going to use the general statues example, but that's history. Are you going to take away statues of George Washington? How far are you going back? Are you going to take away statues of kings and queens of England and statues of Roman? I mean, everybody had slaves at one point, and I think it's remembering those times, via these statues for some people, and maybe it's remembering, I can't imagine they're going to remember their heyday via those statues, but that's what's implied. It's frankly appalling. It's their area, it's their history. I'm sorry if it doesn't remind these people of anything. They weren't there. Anyway, I'm sorry. To me, it's erasing history, and that's really dangerous. You watch the killing fields. It's erasing thought. You're not allowed to have free thought. If someone wants to still believe in the Confederate flag and that person, that's his prerogative, right? And that's part of the problem. Anyway, okay, so, yeah, I got on a huge tangent there. All right, well, Cuba's, the people are really nice, and there's, the cars that are all the 50s cars. Why? Because they got frozen in time. Once we left, there were no good cars. All the good cars now are the tourist companies and the hotels bringing them. Otherwise, they're old 50s. They're nice and they're fun, but it's just obvious that something went wrong there. But I hope this helps everybody to think a little bit more about what's going on, and look outside the window, look out on the TV, and then watch this movie, look at this, and understand that you can't, obviously it's the 2020 version of this, but the optics and the ideals and the behavior are exactly the same. And so we can learn a lot from history. And that takes me to the next one. I think, if you're tired or whatever, take a break now, because it's a long video, but I'm encouraged by, please subscribe. Also, it's the only way YouTube recognizes you, and do likes and stuff like that, because You know, I'm sure they don't like me, or maybe they do. Who knows? So I wanted to show you something. I have this collection of books that I found, ironically, in Ojai, collecting dust in an antique store, unbelievably. And it's an official copy, a set of books that was kind of sanctioned, not kind of, was sanctioned by the 52nd Congress of the United States and under the direction of both the House and the Senate. And it's every president's notes, letters, and memoirs on every executive order. And trust me, when you read some of these executive orders, proclamations, opinions on bills, etc., ideas on what's going on, and I just pulled it out to look at Teddy Roosevelt, and I was shocked at what I found. So I'm going to just read a passage out of this and some other things that I thought were interesting that I thought you'd find interesting as well. Here we go. Should have this ready. So this is the volume here, and this is Teddy Roosevelt. Almost has a volume and the third, which is amazing. Oh, I forgot to show you this. This is a painting by an artist named Salvador, and he is a Cuban artist, and I met him on the street, actually. He was trying to sell art, and we started talking, and he said, invited me back to his house, and I was like, oh no, like I was a little scared, and the guy said, no, this guy's not super famous, but everyone knows him, he's kind of famous. And I said, okay. So I went to his house, and it was like a voodoo kind of shrine. There were all these multiple shrines in different places with incense and candles and things. And he took me down to this cave basement where he had a lot of paintings kind of lined up, and I kind of went through them, and this is the one I picked. But really cool art, and this is kind of the one thing I was able to bring back from Cuba. All right, so to the books. Let me set this back up. India is great for this. All right, I sent this to a few friends just to kind of get a take on this because I was shocked, and there are no coincidences in life. So I don't know if you know this, and I was just reading about him. This is Woodrow Wilson. We'll do something on Woodrow Wilson. It was under him that the Federal Reserve was created in 1913. But I was just reading about McKinley because this is a very old book, one of the most interesting presidents. He was a people's president. He went into the army as a private. Can you imagine that? What president goes into the army as a private? Not Theodore Roosevelt, colonel, charged of San Juan. And he was assassinated by an anarchist. And anarchists are not new to the human race, and they've been around for a long time, and they rear up every time they believe there's social injustice. And he was assassinated because they didn't like him. But and Theodore Roosevelt succeeded him. But I just wanted to kind of give you some history on McKinley. So, the thing I wanted to say about this right away is that, people were so much better educated. When you read this, the vocabulary, because I've discussed this, our government was really kind of intended for, and our constitution and system for really educated people, not career politicians. And just to give you an idea, Theodore Roosevelt went to Harvard, graduated in 1880. The following year, he was already a member of the Assembly of the State of New York. He was also the delegation for the National Republican Convention. He was the member of the Civil Service Commission, president of the Board of Police Commissioners of New York City, assistant to the Secretary of Navy. And of course, he was in the Army and charged up a volunteer regiment, cavalry up San Juan Hill, the Rough Riders. I'm sure you've all heard of that. But can you imagine Trump taking a horse and charging his men where most of them died up a hill? The reason why I compare Trump is I think Theodore Roosevelt was a nationalist, which just means you care about your country and your people first. And I think he was kind of one that was similar to Trump. So, look, Trump bothers me in a lot of ways, right? But I'm not going to make a comment on it. I'm trying to keep this neutral. There's not a lot of choices. So this is December 3rd, 1901. And just so you guys know, this book was prepared under the direction of the Joint Committee of the House and Senate pursuant to an act of the 52nd Congress of the United States. This is like a book that you'd find in the Library of Congress, gold leaf and all kinds of cool stuff. So anyway, he's talking about the anarchists, and there are no coincidences, right? Theodore Roosevelt, I mean, how did I find this, right? I was just looking for it because looking at Theo for Cuba, and I had no intention of talking about anarchists. So, just to give you a background, President McKinley was a man of moderate means whose stock sprang up from the sturdy tillers of the soil, who had himself belonged among the wage workers, who had entered the army as a private soldier and was not wealthy when at president and was assassinated, but an honest man with moderate gains after a lifetime of unremitting labor, largely in the service of the public. Okay, so here we go. And this is worth it. After this, just a few other interesting things and we're out. Thanks for listening. Please subscribe if you've made this far. I hope you're enjoying this. Here we go. This criminal was a professed anarchist, inflamed by the teachings of professed anarchists, and probably also by the reckless utterances of those who on the stump, meaning on the sidelines, and in public press, appeal to the dark and evil spirits of malice and greed, envy and sullen hatred. The wind is soughed by the men who preach such doctrines, and they cannot escape their share of responsibility for the whirlwind that is reaped. This applies alike to the deliberate demagogue, to the exploiter of sensationalism, sound familiar? And to the crude and foolish visionaries who, for whatever reason, apologize for the crime or excites aimless discontent. This blow was aimed not at the president, but at all presidents, at every symbol of government. President McKinley was emphatically the embodiment of popular will of the nation, expressed through the forms of law, voting, and elected. On no conceivable theory could the murder of the president or any representative be accepted as due protest against quote-unquote inequalities in social order, quote-unquote. It's really familiar. History repeats itself. Save as the murder of all of the free men engaged in a town meeting could be accepted as a protest against social inequality, which puts a malefactor in jail. Anarchy is no more an expression of quote-unquote social discontent, end quote, than picking pockets or wife beating. Wow. The anarchist, and especially the anarchist in the United States, is merely one type of criminal, more dangerous than any other because he represents the same depravity in a greater degree. The man who advocates anarchy directly or indirectly in any shape or fashion, or the man who apologizes for the anarchists and their deeds, makes himself morally accessory to murder before the fact. The anarchists, that's what's going on, right? People are getting killed and people are cheering. The anarchist is a criminal whose perverted instincts lead him to prefer confusion and chaos to the most beneficent form of social order. His protest of concern for working men is outrageous in its imprudent falsity. For if the political institutions of this country do not afford opportunity to every honest and intelligent son of toil, then the door of hope is forever closed against him. The anarchist is everywhere, not merely the enemy of the system and of progress, but the deadly foe of liberty. If ever anarchy is triumphant, its triumphant will last only for but one red moment, to be succeeded for ages by the gloomy night of despotism. For the anarchist himself, whether he preaches or practices his doctrines, we need not have one particle more concern than any ordinary murderer. He is not the victim of social or political injustice. There are no wrongs to remedy in this case. The cause of criminality is to be found in evil passions and evil conduct of those who urge, not in any failure by others or by the state to do justice to him or his. He is a malefactor and nothing else. He is in no sense, in no shape or way, product of social conditions, save as a highwayman is produced by the fact that an unarmed man happens to have a purse. It is a travesty upon the great and holy names of liberty and freedom to permit them to be invoked in such a cause. No man or body of men preaching anarchistic doctrine should be allowed any more if preaching the murder of specific private individuals. Anarchist speeches, writings, meetings are essentially seditious and treasonable. I earnestly recommend the Congress that in exercise of its wise discretion, it should take into consideration the coming to this country of anarchists or persons professing principles hostile to all government and justifying the murder of those placed in authority. I mean, like Scalia's been shot. Such individuals as those who not long ago gathered upon the meeting to glorify the murder of King Umbert of Italy perpetrate a crime. The law should ensure their rigorous punishment. Remember, by this point in time, I think already 3 or 4 presidents had been murdered. They and those like them should be kept out of this country, and if found here, they should be promptly deported to the country whence they came, as far-reaching provisions should be made for the punishment of those who stay. No matter calls for urgently for the wisest thought of Congress. The federal court should be given jurisdiction over any man who kills or attempts to kill any man by the Constitution or by its law in the line of succession, while the punishment for an unsuccessful attempt should be proportionate to the enormity of the offense against our institution. Anarchy is a crime against the whole human race, and all mankind should ban against the anarchists. His crime should be made of offense against the law of nations, like piracy, and that form of man-stealing known as the slave trade, for it is of a far blacker infamy than either. It should be so declared by treaties among all civilized powers. Such treaties would give the federal government the power of dealing with this crime. A grim commentary on the folly of the anarchist position was afforded by the attitude of the law towards this very criminal who had just taken the life of the president. The people who would have torn him limb from limb if not had been from the law that he defied at once invoked in his behalf. So far from his deed being committed on behalf of the people against the government was obliged at once to exert its full police power to save him from instant death at the hands of the people. This sounds so familiar. Moreover, his deed worked not the slightest dislocation in our government system, and the danger of a recurrence of such deeds, no matter how great it might grow, would work only in the direction of strengthening and giving harshness to the forces of order. This is going on right now. The more you have anarchy, the more harshness of the police happen. No man will ever be restrained from becoming president by fear as to his personal safety. If the risk to life became great, it would mean that the office would more and more come to be filled by men of spirit, which would make them resolute and merciless in dealing with every friend of disorder. This great country will not fall into anarchy. If the anarchists should ever become a serious menace to its institutions, they would not merely be stamped out, but would involve their own ruin, every active or passive sympathizer with their doctrines. The American people are slow to wrath, but their wrath, once kindled, it burns like a consuming flame. I don't know, maybe it's just me, but when I read that, I was like, wow. Okay, just a few interesting kind of I bet you didn't know. So this is his comment on Hawaii. He comments on every country, every state. This is their plans. I'm not down with this. In Hawaii, our claim must be to develop the territory on a traditional American lines. We do not wish a region of the largest estates tilled by cheap labor. We wish a healthy American community. What about the Hawaiians? Healthy American community of men who themselves till farms they own. Our legislation for the island should be shaped with this end in view. The well-being of the average homemaker must afford the true test of a healthy development of these islands. The land policy should be nearly possible be modeled on our homestead system. Goes on to talk about Puerto Rico and Cuba. just quickly, just 2 more short guys. It's almost done. This last song, I'm tired as well. This talks about the Monroe Doctrine. You guys probably know that's where we just kind of said everything in this hemisphere is ours because it affects our security when we did whatever we did, which was, that's why I say this doesn't end well. You know, we shouldn't talk about interference in our elections by others because that's all we have done, right? We have gone into every country in Central and South America and interfered with their elections and killed leaders and put in our people, and it's just hypocritical. Like my stance on this is because, you know, just can't be hypocritical, right? So whoever has the biggest gun makes the rules, and just hope they have a conscience, because that's the ultimate law of the land. This one is about Indians. I'm almost done. I hope there's one more song. This was, we're back to Princess Nubian. Africa is in my head, in my body. All right. In my judgment, the time has arrived when we should definitely make up our minds to recognize the Indian as an individual and not a member of a tribe. The General Allotment Act is a mighty pulverizing engine to break up the tribal mass. It acts directly upon the family and the individual. Under its provisions, some 60,000 Indians have already become citizens of the United States. We should now break up the tribal funds, doing for them what allotment does for tribal lands. That is, they should be divided into individual holdings. There will be a transition period during which the funds will, in many cases, have to be held in trust, etc., etc. I know this is boring, but I just want you guys to see, you know, here. This is about executive orders and eminent domain. In accordance with the provisions of the Act of Congress approved on June 4th, 1897, and by virtue of the authority thereby given, on the recommendation of the Secretary of the Interior, it is hereby ordered that sections 23, 24, blah, 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 and within Colorado, blah, blah, within the limits of the Black Mesa Forest Reserve, to be restored to the public domain after 60 days notice hereof by publication. As required by law, these tracts having been found upon personal and official inspection to be better adapted to agricultural and forest purposes. So basically, you know, he has the right to transfer land back and forth ownership like that. The point is that they can do anything they want. So my dad always said, never take the elephant on head on, you'll never win. You need to be the flea on the elephant's back. Okay, you know, I just want everybody to have some free thought, or not want, would love everybody would exercise some free thought. Watch some of these movies, you know, and see if it doesn't look similar in ideal and in theory and in behavior and in, to me it's very eerie and scary. And so I felt compelled to just get these videos out. I had no intention of making these types of videos really, but I just feel this need. I don't know why. So again, it's a long video, but I'm going for it now because I feel like people are interested and I appreciate that. I have a lot to share, and if you just come from the travel portal alone, it won't be so political. I think the next few ones are going to be about Cambodia and then Rwanda, but even in those you'll see some great visuals as I post them. Guerrilla trekking, some, you know, the Great Migration across the river in Tanzania, cheetahs, lions, leopards, crocodiles eating wildebeest in the river, just like National Geographic, crazy stuff. Anyway, I appreciate living here and I appreciate all the opportunities that have afforded me, and I just hope that they don't get destroyed by what's going on right now. And people are giving up their rights left and right, and the Constitution doesn't matter anymore. The law doesn't matter anymore, and I don't understand why. I don't understand why. Okay, I'm starting to get a little bit convicted, and so I should probably end it here. But thank you for listening. Please be positive and be kind and represent your tribe well. All right, clutch at Ojai out. I hope you liked Le Nubian and India. French, and Latin. Thanks a lot. Bye.